Now, the US election. The presidential debate earlier this week was a disgrace. Viewers will have seen the lowlights. If not, you can catch up on them with the SpectatorTV US election special from Wednesday night. It's up on YouTube. We'll have a montage there and analysis. But is it a taste of things to come? The outcome of this November's election is likely to be more fraught than Bush v. Gore in 2000. Our cover piece this week explains exactly why, and I'm joined now by Matt Purple, senior editor of the American Conservative, and he penned that cover piece. Matt, welcome. I want to come on to some of the things that might happen on election day and in the immediate aftermath. You were writing about them, but I want to put something more broadly to you for your reaction. I get the sense that the Trump campaign's in real trouble now. It was in trouble before it went into the debate. And it's in trouble, more trouble, coming out of that debate. And that a lot of them are not sure how they're going to get this show back on the road, and that he's probably going to lose.
Yeah, I mean, it really was the Chernobyl of debates. It was absolutely a disgrace, like you were saying before. We have never seen anything even remotely close to that in American history. And I think the crazy thing about it is that the president reportedly walked off the stage thinking he had done a good job, patting himself on the back, and he'd really stuck it to Joe Biden. And it took his advisors going to him and telling him, no, you went on too hot, like you came on too strong. You got to dial it back last time. And so I think that draws in a problem here, which is that Trump is so willful and he's so determined to be Donald Trump. He can't really be anything else. He can't change his stripes. That, if you have to alter course, if you have to come off as a little bit more civil in the next debate or try to correct your errors, Trump is not somebody who corrects his errors. He is somebody who declares victory even when he's in defeat. He's somebody who rarely ever apologizes for anything. So his handlers are going to be struggling with that. And I think, Biden has been ahead consistently in the polls. The one thin reed of hope that Trump voters or Trump's people have hung on to is that 2016 situation, where an awful lot of people didn't tell pollsters they were voting for Donald Trump because they were embarrassed, they were a bit sheepish about it. There was kind of this invisible man factor that came back and propelled him over the edge just at the end, or over the top just at the end. And everyone is on the right is crossing their fingers and hoping that's going to happen again this time. The problem is, you still need to win over independent voters. You still need to bring back some of those Catholics in the deindustrialized Rust Belt states that you won last time around. You need to reel in some political independence. How many undecided voters watched that nuclear storm and thought, oh yeah, I really got a good show of the candidates there. I mean, I was really able to discern who I'm going to vote for. I really learned something. Nobody at all. If anything, they're just going to be repelled by Donald Trump.
If you stand back a bit and think, all right, what's Mr. Trump got going for him? He's probably got the economy going for him. He pulls better than Mr. Biden on that. He's actually had, to many people's surprises, some reasonable foreign policy successes. His hard line with China is the new normal in Washington now. Even Mr. Biden, who used to cozy up to the Chinese, was attacking the China in the debate. He's brought off as a remarkable feat of the UAE and Bahrain opening diplomatic relations with Israel. And a lot more of these Gulf states are going to follow. But I would suggest his problem is that rather than talking about these things or bringing these sort of things to the fore, which would make him seem a bit more presidential if that's possible, this bluster, this heckling, this hectoring is all people see. And the noise obscures any of the substance.
He made his own temperament the issue, which I think was the problem. He made his disposition the issue. And the public liked that to an extent in 2016. They were in a very rebellious mood. But he was also running against a wildly unpopular Democratic candidate, a candidate who, from the beginning, like from the time she entered the Democratic primary all the way back in 2015, had a massive trust deficit in the polls. People did not like her. He's running against somebody this time around who's genuinely more likable, who I think you can present a better contrast, who comes off that way. I think the answers that Joe Biden gives at the debates are going to be weaker than Hillary Clinton's, but I think overall, he's a better package for independent voters. And the problem is if Trump comes off in that boorish manner, if he draws all that attention to, onto himself, well, first of all, you run the risk that the public is not in quite as rebellious a mood this time around. Second of all, you run the risk of you're the incumbent. you don't just get to punch people around. You don't just get to pump your fist in the air. You have a record to defend. You're supposed to be containing some of these problems. You're supposed to be pointing to things that you were able to accomplish, not just absolutely flamethrowing your opponent, which is what he came off into, and also behaving with some kind of presidential decorum. I mean, remember, he's no longer just the host of The Apprentice. He is now the president of the United States, and inevitably is going to get judged with a different prism, or through a different prism, I think, because of that. And yeah, I think it called attention to the worst of Donald Trump. I don't think that Biden necessarily rose above it. I don't think that you can call that a decisive win for Joe Biden per se. No. I think it was just, negative hellfire all around, and Trump ended up getting burned the most.
I wonder, Matt, if the Republicans are right to put so much faith in the polls being wrong. I mean, the polls will always be wrong to some extent. But this time round, they've made a number of changes. They're correcting for education, which they didn't do before. Because education had never been a huge factor in how people voted. In 2016, it was a huge factor in how people voted, and they're correcting for that. They've brought in the more non-college educated, those who have left high school or even didn't leave high school with a diploma. There are fewer undecideds now, many fewer than there were last time. Mr. Biden has twice the lead among women that Hillary Clinton had. In Pennsylvania, which Mr. Trump has to win, Mr. Biden's rocking it in Philadelphia. He's sweeping the suburbs as well, particularly with the soccer moms and so on. But he's holding up in the western counties as well, which is what got Mr. Trump the victory last time round. And when you look at all that, just in Pennsylvania, and there are plenty of other examples, I would suggest, Matt, I think Donald Trump realizes he's going to lose. He's certainly going to lose the popular vote, and he will probably in the end lose the electoral college vote. So he's already planning the ground for that. He's going to say that I won on the day. I won by the people who turned up to vote, the honest way, the old American way. All these votes that have since come in the following week are fraudulent. They're fixed. You can't count on them. I still won. That will be a constitutional crisis, will it not?
It could be, yeah. If Biden doesn't win in an absolute crushing landslide, or we should say Trump doesn't win in an absolute crushing landslide, it could be. And, this gets back to what I said in my piece, which is that, we Americans like to file lawsuits. Well, we've been filing them over this election already. There are more than 300 lawsuits that have already been filed, even before voting starts. Most of them by Republicans, most of them worried about the mail-in balloting. They do have some reason to be concerned. During New York's primary elections, for example, back in June, there was a lot of mail-in ballots. We have more mail-in ballots than usual right now because of the coronavirus, so they're encouraging people to mail their ballots in rather than going to polling places. And in New York's primary, there ended up being real chaos afterwards. It took them weeks to determine the winner. They ended up accidentally throwing out a bunch of ballots, a number of ballots that they shouldn't have, that they then had to reel back in. It did not give confidence in our electoral system. And there are partisans on both sides who are lawyering up, who are extremely polarized to an almost existential degree, who think that if the Republicans or Democrats get elected this time around, it's not just going to be bad, it's going to mean the end of them. That really is the heated political climate in the United States we're dealing with, and who think, okay, we're going to fight this as far as we possibly can. We're going to take it as far as we can. And then into all of this comes the death of a Supreme Court Justice, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, taking the Supreme Court down to an even 8 justices. So the high court could split evenly if it comes all the way up to that. In that case, it wouldn't be like in the year 2000 when the Supreme Court determined by a 5-4 vote the winner of that election, gave it to George W. Bush. And you could end up with a situation where you have to go back to the lower courts, but there's multiple lawsuits, multiple lower courts, different standards are applied in different states. That creates confusion. It allows both sides to declare victory, and suddenly we are in the likes of a constitutional crisis that we have never seen before.
Well, in the year 2000, there was only Florida really in contention. In 1876, there were 4 states in contention, naturally including Florida. It always seems to be there. And it took them 3 months to resolve. These 4 states sent different delegates of electors, one for Tilden, the Democrat, one for Rutherford Hayes, the Republican. And they sent teams of both to support them. And it was only resolved with 56 hours to go. And in these days, the inauguration wasn't until March. It's now in the Constitution that it's on January the 20th. It could be a very, given, Matt, final question to you on this, given the febrile mood in so many American cities at the moment, all these people walking around with automatic rifles and so, I mean, only in America could you see that. It seems to me it's a dangerous time for the United States. And what happens if in that 11-week period, President Xi decides it's time to make a move in Taiwan? Or President Putin decides, let's put the screws on Latvia. Who's going to be running the country?
Yeah. Well, semi-automatic rifles, Andrew. Let's not go too crazy here, but it's.
We don't know anything about guns.
They're walking around with really big guns. Yeah, it's
bigger than the pop gun I had when I was a kid.
Right. It's a very fraught, potentially violent situation. And I actually said 1888 election on the podcast this morning. So you're right. It was 1876. And the subtext of that is that Samuel Tilden, the candidate who ultimately lost, Rutherford B. Hayes was in the White House. His supporters never let them forget it. They always claimed that he was robbed. They never let go of it. And so you had this situation over the next 4 years where there was legitimate tension, where there was an illegitimate president in the minds of a lot of people. And Trump is already illegitimate in the minds of a lot of people on the left. They don't think that he won fair and square. He snuck in with a minority of the popular vote, snuck by in the Electoral College. And so you're dealing suddenly with this question of presidential legitimacy, of what happens even if you do manage to get a winner in there, even if you do manage to have somebody declared, what if half the country doesn't accept it? What if they do turn to violence in the streets? What if, that is the match that lights up the powder keg? And I really don't know. I grew up in a time in America, the 1990s, when we seemed to be totally stable. The Soviet Union had fallen. We were king of the hill. People were talking about a unipolar world, and the United States could do whatever we wanted, and everybody was looking up to us. And now suddenly we're that problem nation. We're that nation over a barrel. And I think we can get out of it. There's no reason to think that we can't. Our history has been much more fraught and violent than a lot of people sometimes think. We've kind of been here before, but certainly enormous challenges and dark times in America potentially going forward.
That election in 1876 resulted in the Compromise of 1877, which gave Rutherford Hayes the White House, but it gave the racists and the segregationists the South. And after that Compromise of 1877, there was not a fair election for blacks in the South until 1968. There was a big price to pay. I just wonder what it will be this time.